Yeah.
A very good afternoon to all of you. I'm Nidhi Goyal from Mumbai, India. First of all, I would like to start by thanking the conference organizers and Sisters of FRIDA, and for all of you for giving me this opportunity to speak at this conference. So today I'm here as a disability and gender rights activist, as a disabled feminist, but I'd like to take you back to a point where I began. I began with a transition from a non-disabled teenager into someone who acquired an irreversible, incurable eye disorder, which would ultimately render her blind. So people ask me, oh, you know, that transition, that acquiring a disability would have been traumatizing, right? Yes, it was, and it would be then. But what I really remember from that experience is the irony that as I was going blind, the blindness was further opening my eyes. I could see, observe, and experience things that I wouldn't have experienced otherwise. So I saw that this lovely city, which I love a lot, which I loved before and I love now, and is one of the safest cities in India, I saw that how it was very unwelcoming to a person with a disability then in the early 2000s. I saw that it was unwelcoming because there was a lack of access. Access to transportation, access to education, access to employment, access to social spaces. I saw that an educational institute which would very warmly welcome a non-disabled student with the right qualifications would obligingly and grudgingly take in or accept, quote unquote, a disabled student with a similar qualification. I saw that society that was very not empathetic but sympathetic and pitying towards my parents would pity them more because there was a daughter and she was disabled. I saw that the Bollywood cinema, that most of us Indians like a lot, had no place for representation of a person like me, so a person who was disabled. If there was a representation, it was as a burden. It was someone who constantly needed care and would be a care receiver. It would be someone who would, as a representation, would never be, quote unquote, accepted in love. I grew up in such an environment, but I grew, I endured, and I succeeded. But this was not just because of my inner strength. It was because I was privileged. I had the privilege of being from urban India. I had the privilege of being from middle class. I had the privilege of speaking English. I had the privilege of having an educated, very, very supportive parents and family. A structure that helped me lean back on them in a country where social security is zilch, is next to nil. This made me realize that not every woman with a disability has this kind of support that I have, this kind of privilege that I have. And that's when I decided that I would work towards changing the ethos or altering the environment for women with disabilities. Sorry. After acquiring a mass media degree and working as a journalist for a couple of years, all through which I had noticed that the women's rights movement and the disability rights movement left a gap in between. The gap through which the woman with a disability slipped downwards. No one heard her, and that's when I decided that I would work with mainstream women's rights organizations and work with them on issues of women with disabilities. I started my work with Point of View and their partners, CREA, who pioneered an online initiative called sexualityandisability.org. By then, there were NGOs, DPOs, organizations, government, working on rehabilitation, working on access, education, employment, etc., but none were really giving a thought about gendered components of disabilities. None were obviously talking about sexual and reproductive health and rights. When we started work in this area, the first thing that we received was a lot of flack, was a lot of resistance, because especially according to the disability rights groups and disabled activists, this was sexual rights, that is, was a non-issue, complete non-issue, or an absolutely superfluous one, because it wasn't necessary, according to them, to a person with a disability or for his or her survival. Over the years, we launched the website in 2012, which speaks about sexual rights of women with disabilities, and over the years we've managed to reach around 250,000 visitors, and that speaks volumes. For the past 1 year, we've also taken this initiative offline and have started reaching women at their homes and organizations organizations, at their institutes, etc., and started talking to them about how they would relearn or rediscover their own sexuality and sexual rights. This is an initiative that's been going on for the past 4.5 years. And one of our key roles, other than supporting the women with disabilities and providing information, is also to create public awareness, to change, to alter the environment and ethos, as I mentioned. But going back to the policy level, where a trickle-down effect is absolutely necessary from the policy and legal level. So in India, there is a new Disability Act, upcoming Disability Act, to hold up the UNCRPD, to uphold the UNCRPD rather. And that Disability Act shockingly missed out again on women with disabilities. So a group of us, a few disabled feminists, decided to lobby with the government, and it speaks volumes that where disabled feminists in the early 90s, late 90s, early 2000s were very handful and were sporadically making efforts to bring this discourse in the public, we managed to elicit a huge response from the community, from activists and organizations, when we said that we wanted a separate chapter on women with disabilities in the upcoming act. We approached the ministry, so we approached our department, the Department of Empowerment of Persons with Disabilities, under whose jurisdiction was this act. But we also approached the other ministries. We spoke to the Ministry of Women and Child Development, to the Ministry of Labour and Employment, to the Health Ministry, etc., to bring to notice how intersectionality plays a huge, huge role in this act and in the lives of women with disabilities, as in many other cases. Well, we received mixed responses. We received empathetic responses from someone like a Ministry of Women, who was completely outraged at the clauses that restricted and prohibited reproductive rights of women with disabilities, to some negative responses where bureaucrats and policymakers accused us of being discriminatory and trying to separate and segregate women with disabilities from the mainstream persons with disabilities, or the group or the constituencies. Well, we've kept our fingers crossed, but with the kind of lobbying that we've managed to do, hopefully things will move forward soon. But my work and experience in India, and my associations with the rest of the world, so my work with disabled feminists in the UK, my presentations, talks at various conferences and institutes, etc., have taught me that there is a huge global resonance to issues. And that is why my activism at the global level, and I think all of us need to do this, is a very two-part activism. So one, the main agenda of the activism, of the two parts, is to seal that gap between which the woman with a disability was slipping. So I've been working at the ASEAN level, the Southeast Asian level, and partly at in the other areas of the globe, where I'm training disability rights activists who are working on access and other issues, on understandings of gender, sexual and reproductive health and rights, and pushing for how to advocate for these areas of disability. On the other hand, I'm working with organizations like AVID, Association for Women's Rights and Development, where we're working to create an integrated space in the feminist mainstream events like the International Forum, where women with disabilities can find their voice, can find an access. What we really need to do is to collaborate, not only disabled feminists from all over the globe, but we really need to collaborate the non-disabled feminists with the disabled feminists, not only because of the collective power that we find, but it will be amazing if non-disabled feminists can accept disability as a diversity within the feminist movement. Like caste, religion is a diversity, so is disability. Like feminist movements, for feminist conferences like this one today, has offered an equal space and respect for a woman with a disability or a disabled feminist. Similarly, if in our movements, if we found space, it also helps, and this is through experience, it also helps push the identity, the dignity and respect for a woman with a disability within the disability rights space. So our one point motto should be integration, collaboration, and working together. With this, I'll come to the end of my talk. Thank you very much.